Welcome back to the archives, where we dive into the strange, spooky, and downright fascinating. Today, we're embarking on a cross-country journey through the United States, uncovering the most absurd and obscure laws still technically on the books. Some of these will make you laugh, others will make you scratch your head, and a few might even make you reconsider your next road trip. Let's get started. Alabama. It's illegal to drive while blindfolded. This law was passed in the 1960s after a prank trend where teens would attempt to test fate by driving without seeing the road. Fun fact: no known arrests have been made, probably because common sense usually prevails. Alaska. It's illegal to wake a sleeping bear to take a photo. Passed in the 1950s, this law aimed to reduce human-bear conflicts in the growing tourist industry. Fun fact: surprisingly, park rangers have fined several people who ignored this law while attempting the ultimate wildlife selfie. Arizona. Donkeys may not sleep in bathtubs. In the 1920s, a rancher's donkey fell asleep in a bathtub, and a flash flood carried it miles downstream, requiring an elaborate rescue effort. Fun fact: the law was passed as a preventative measure, but there's no record of modern enforcement. Arkansas. It's illegal to mispronounce Arkansas. A 1947 law declared that the correct pronunciation is Arkansas to preserve state heritage. Enforcement is rare, but locals might correct you with more fervor than any law officer. California. It's illegal to whistle for a lost canary before 7 a.m. in Berkeley. Enacted during the 1920s, this law was meant to curb noise pollution in residential areas. It's unlikely anyone has faced charges, but maybe your neighbors appreciate the quiet mornings. Colorado. It's illegal to catapult flaming projectiles at buildings. A 1921 law addressed a spate of vandalism involving flaming hay bales during a local feud. While the law feels medieval, it's rarely enforced but technically still applies. Connecticut. Law: pickles must bounce to be considered pickles. Why it exists. In 1948, two men sold subpar pickles, prompting this odd test to ensure product quality. Fun fact: Connecticut's Department of Consumer Protection enforces the rule to this day. Delaware. Law: it's illegal to sell dog hair. Why it exists. Passed in the early 1900s, this law prevented scammers from selling dog hair as a substitute for more valuable furs. Fun fact: there's little evidence of modern enforcement, but it technically applies statewide. Florida. Law: you must pay for a parking meter if you tie your elephant to it. Why it exists. During the 1920s circus boom, this law clarified that elephants counted as vehicles. Fun fact: no arrests, but it's a fun reminder of Florida's colorful history. Georgia. Law: you cannot eat fried chicken with a fork in Gainesville. Why it exists. Passed as a publicity stunt in 1961 to promote Gainesville as the chicken capital of the world. Fun fact: tourists have been jokingly arrested for breaking this law during their visits. Hawaii. Law: coins are not allowed to be placed in your ears. Why it exists. This law was passed to discourage street performers and tricksters from using coins and magic acts that could be swallowed by children. Fun fact: no known arrests, but it's a quirky rule that reflects Hawaii's unique cultural concerns. Idaho. Law. It's illegal to give someone a box of chocolates weighing more than 50 pounds. Why it exists. This law was enacted to discourage over-the-top gift-giving and potential bribery in early 20th century elections. Fun fact. No one's ever been fined, but it's still technically on the books. Illinois. Law. It's illegal to fall asleep in a cheese shop in Chicago. Why it exists. Passed in the 1920s to address public hygiene concerns and loitering during the city's bustling cheese trade. Fun fact. While bizarre, the law reflects Chicago's cheese-loving heritage. Indiana. Law mustaches are illegal if the bearer habitually kisses others. Why it exists. Enacted in the late 1800s as part of public decency laws discouraging improper conduct. Fun fact. This law is more of a relic than anything enforceable today. Iowa. Law. It's illegal to use a butter substitute in public eateries without a warning. Why it exists. This law, passed in the early 1900s, protected Iowa's dairy industry from margarine. Fun fact, restaurants often display warnings as a joke, though the law remains. Kansas. Law. It's illegal to serve ice cream on cherry pie. Why it exists. Aimed at preserving the integrity of traditional Kansas cherry pie recipes. Fun fact. There's no record of anyone being arrested, but it's a funny tradition to note. Kentucky. Law. You must bathe at least once a year. Why it exists. This 19th century law aimed to promote public health and hygiene in rural areas. Fun fact. It's probably the least enforced law in the state. Louisiana. Law. It's illegal to send someone a surprise pizza. Why it exists. Designed to combat prank pizza orders, this law carries a fine for wasting businesses' time. Fun fact. There have been occasional fines for repeat offenders. Maine. Law. It's illegal to park in front of Dunkin' Donuts in South Berwick. Why it exists. Passed to prevent traffic jams in a small town where the Dunkin' is the main attraction. Fun fact. Locals jokingly refer to it as the coffee law. Maryland. Law. It's illegal to curse while driving in Rockville. Why it exists. Enacted to reduce road rage incidents. Fun fact. This law is rarely enforced, but you could technically face a fine. Massachusetts. Law. It's illegal to scare pigeons in public parks. Why it exists. Passed in the 1800s to prevent animal cruelty and preserve city aesthetics. Fun fact. It's probably one of Boston's most ignored laws. Michigan. Law. It's illegal to sell cars on Sundays. Why it exists. This blue law was designed to honor the Sabbath. Fun fact. Some dealerships still follow it, even if it's loosely enforced. Minnesota. Law. It's illegal to sleep naked. Why it exists. Passed in the early 1900s, this law was intended to promote modesty and fire safety. Fun fact, nobody's been arrested, but it's technically still enforceable. Mississippi. Law. It's illegal to teach others what polygamy is. Why it exists. This law, dating back to the 1800s, was designed to discourage polygamous practices in the state. Fun fact, enforcement is essentially non-existent. Missouri. It's illegal to drive with an uncaged bear. This law was enacted after an incident where a circus bear escaped from a car in the 1920s. While it's rare to see bears in cars now, the law still exists. Montana. It's illegal to use a fountain for the purpose of washing your hands. This 19th century law aimed to preserve the purity of public drinking water. Nobody's been arrested, but signs still warn against it. Nebraska. You can't get married if you have an STD. This law was passed in the early 1900s to protect public health. This law has been challenged but remains technically enforceable. Nevada. Law. It's illegal to sit on sidewalks in Reno. Why it exists. Passed in the 1970s to deter loitering and homelessness in tourist-heavy areas. Fun fact, violators may face a small fine. New Hampshire. Law. It's illegal to tap your feet or nod your head in time to music in a tavern. Why it exists. Enacted to prevent dancing in establishments without a license. Fun fact. Enforcement is rare, but it reflects the state's Puritan roots. New Jersey. Law. It's illegal to pump your own gas. Why it exists. Passed in 1949 to create jobs and ensure safety. Fun fact, Oregon has a similar law, though it's been partially repealed. New Mexico. Law. Idiots may not vote. Why it exists. This 1910 law used outdated terminology to exclude those deemed mentally incompetent. Fun fact. This language has been updated, but the sentiment remains controversial. New York. Law. It's illegal to wear slippers after 10 p.m. Why it exists. Passed to discourage casual loitering and protect public decency. Fun fact, no known arrests, but it's still technically enforceable. North Carolina. Law. It's illegal to sing off-key in public. Why it exists. Enacted in the 19th century to maintain public decorum in town squares. Fun fact, enforcement is non-existent, but locals love to joke about it. North Dakota. Law. It's illegal to lie down and fall asleep with your shoes on. Why it exists. This quirky law was passed to prevent bar patrons from overstaying their welcome by passing out in public places. Fun fact. While largely ignored today, it remains on the books. Ohio. Law. It's illegal to get a fish drunk. Why it exists. Aimed at preventing animal cruelty during fishing and hunting outings. Fun fact. While it's unclear how one would get a fish drunk, the law still stands. Oklahoma. Law. You can't make ugly faces at dogs. Why it exists. This law was enacted to discourage harassment of animals in public spaces. Fun fact, there are no recorded arrests, but locals love to tease about it. Oregon. Law. It's illegal to test your physical endurance while driving. Why it exists. Passed in the 1930s to curb dangerous stunts during endurance challenges. Fun fact. It's one of the few laws on this list that still makes a lot of sense. Pennsylvania. Law. It's illegal to barter infant children. Why it exists. Enacted to curb illegal adoption practices in the early 20th century. Fun fact. While obvious by today's standards, this law was groundbreaking at the time. Rhode Island. Law. It's illegal to bite off someone's limb. Why it exists. This law, passed in the 19th century, addressed extreme violence in bar fights. Fun fact: while oddly specific, the law is a testament to early public safety efforts. South Carolina. Law: horses may not be kept in bathtubs. Why it exists. Enacted after a series of floods led to horses being kept indoors, causing property damage. Fun fact: like similar laws in other states, enforcement is non-existent. South Dakota. Law: it's illegal to sleep in a cheese factory. Why it exists. This quirky law aimed to maintain hygiene standards in dairy production facilities. Fun fact: no known arrests, but it's a charming piece of cheese-related trivia. Tennessee. Law: it's illegal to share your Netflix password. Why it exists. Enacted in 2011 to combat digital piracy. Fun fact: while technically enforceable, it's rarely prosecuted. Texas. Law: it's illegal to sell your eyeballs. Why it exists. Aimed at preventing illegal organ trade. Fun fact: this law underscores the state's strict stance on medical ethics. Utah. Law: it's illegal to not drink milk. Why it exists. This early 20th century law promoted dairy consumption as part of a healthy diet. Fun fact: it's more of a symbolic law than one that's actively enforced. Vermont. Law: women must obtain written permission from their husbands to wear false teeth. Why it exists. A 19th century law reflecting outdated gender norms and marital control. Fun fact: it's rarely discussed today but technically still exists. Virginia. Law: it's illegal to hunt on Sundays except for raccoons. Why it exists. This blue law aimed to preserve Sundays as a day of rest, with raccoons being the one exception for nighttime hunters. Fun fact: it's still enforced in rural areas. Washington. Law: it's illegal to harass Bigfoot. Why it exists. This law, passed in 1969, protects Bigfoot as a protected species in certain counties. Fun fact: though no one's been arrested, the law reflects local pride in the Bigfoot legend. West Virginia. Law: it's illegal to whistle underwater. Why it exists. Likely passed as a joke or placeholder law, its origins remain unclear. Fun fact: no arrests, but it's a favorite for trivia lovers. Wisconsin. Law: butter substitutes are banned in state prisons. Why it exists. This law was passed to support the dairy industry and ensure inmates received real butter. Fun fact: Wisconsin's love of dairy remains strong, and this law reflects its heritage. Wyoming. Law: you cannot take a picture of a rabbit from January to April without a permit. Why it exists. Enacted to prevent over-harassment of wildlife during breeding seasons. Fun fact: this law is sometimes enforced in nature reserves. And that's a wrap on America's wildest, wackiest laws. Which one do you think is the weirdest? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next bizarre entry in Encyclopedia Britannica. Until next time, stay curious, and above all, stay